He must have thought he'd gone free, but Peter and I had our plans. Peter was hiding and waiting outside for him. Once he got out, Peter calculated his move before pouncing on him. I ran out with my son to see him sitting on Carl, throwing punches to his face. Peter was a skilled Taekwondo black belt fighter, and Carl was a weakling. I knew he'd be finished in a few minutes. I covered my son's eyes, while Peter continued hitting Carl. He beat Carl up so much that the man was nearly unrecognizable. There was blood all over his body, and his ankles had been twisted by Peter. His right hand was obviously broken. His right eye was bleeding. As we walked away, I doubted his survival if no one found him. Lately, whenever I see someone intentionally ignoring the red flags in their relationships, I feel so angry. I often try to talk them out of it, even though I know it's impossible to make them leave with just a conversation. I just want to try to make a difference. My blood boils whenever I see a man hitting a woman, and most times, I'm tempted to hit the man. You might be wondering, what's her deal? Well, I was once a victim of an abusive relationship. I'm Chloe Sanders, a medical doctor aged 30, now married to the most caring man in the world with our son, Jason. About 10 years ago, I'd met Carl, my ex-husband. When we first met, I never suspected or noticed any signs of him being abusive. He had a very beautiful and friendly smile, but showed no sign of being humble or respectful. Whenever we went out to eat in a restaurant, he got into a fight with a worker. It was either the worker frowned at him, didn't drop his plate soundlessly enough, or walked too fast away from us. It got worse to the extent of me not wanting to follow him out anymore. I was always embarrassed at his behavior. However, that was only a quarter of his attitude. Carl despised kids. I'm a lover of kids, so whenever we went to a park, I loved to wave and smile at kids when I saw them. However, Carl was different. He would make ugly faces at them. If he got a hold on them, he would harm them. And then, when he got angry. Carl could bring down a house if angered. While we were courting, he hit me countless times during arguments. He would sometimes destroy my properties if he got too angry. After 3 days or 4, he would visit me and apologize in tears, claiming to not know what took over him. Of course, I was stupid. I would forgive him whenever he apologized. I ensured that for the 2 years we dated. After my 22nd birthday, he proposed to me. Despite knowing all of the bad behaviors he possessed, I agreed to marry him. Our marriage wasn't huge. I was working then, but Carl wasn't. My money was used to fund the wedding, but I didn't mind. I was blinded by my love for him. Carl grew worse after our wedding. Whenever we fought, he always hit me in my most sensitive spots. My both parents were dead. They died when I was 18, and as a result of that, I had to drop out of college and started working to help myself. Now, before they died, they weren't on good terms. My mother had died first. No, it wasn't a natural death. Her death was as a result of both their mistakes. They were having a fight that week and weren't on speaking terms with each other. My mom was asthmatic and crippled from her waist downward. She'd also run out of her inhaler. But because she wasn't speaking with my dad, she didn't tell him about it. That night, with 3 of us in the living room, my mom had an attack. I immediately rushed to her room to get her inhaler, but I couldn't find any. Meanwhile, my dad had sat there, ignoring her as she struggled to breathe. He'd probably thought I'd bring the inhaler. When I came out a few minutes later, I saw my mom unmoving on the floor and my dad's eyes on the TV. It was only when I screamed that my dad moved. It seemed as though he'd only regained his senses back. No matter how much we tried, we couldn't revive her. My father couldn't live with the guilt. 2 months later, he committed suicide, and I was left alone. I never told anyone about what had truly transpired. I lived with it until I met Carl. Because I told him about it, he always brought it up whenever we were having a fight. I'm not going to do this with your silly ass today, Carl.
You dare not try me, and I'm gonna kill you and bury it up the way you buried the truth about your pathetic parents.
It went like that? Of course. I felt threatened and attacked. So, usually, when he said that, I would keep quiet and simply go into my room to cry. In the 4th month of us being married, I got pregnant. When I told Carl about it, he wasn't happy.
How can you be pregnant? Don't you know I'm jobless? Oh, you plan to take care of the child when it's born and take care of it alone, so I'd be like a bad father, huh?
He was always quick to draw conclusions like that. I tried to explain to him that I'd never think about doing that, but he refused to listen. I was shocked when he asked me to abort the child. What? I'd never do that. You don't expect me to kill my child, Carl. Never.
If you won't, then I'm gonna be left with no choice but to do it myself.
I was terrified. I pondered upon what he had in mind. Out of fear, I stopped eating and drinking anything recklessly in the house. When I cooked, I ensured to eat immediately. When I drank water and left half of it, I never drank the leftover again. I got extra careful, afraid that he might poison me. However, that wasn't what he had in mind. When my pregnancy was 2 months gone, we had our biggest fight. I'd accidentally spilled tea on the new bed cover he bought, and that got him angry. He beat me up like I was nothing but a punching bag. When I lay on the floor, too tired to move, he began stomping his foot on my stomach. I screamed out in pain, begging him to stop, but he refused.
This asshole in you is dying today. I'm not gonna allow you to bring any problems here. Die, child.
I could tell, right there, that Carl wasn't in his right senses. Once he saw that I was bleeding, he stopped, grabbed his phone, wallet, a few clothes and shoes before rushing out of the house, leaving me to whatever fate had in store for me. I managed, with my last strength, to call the ambulance. Once I'd given my location and asked them to hurry, I passed out. When I woke up in the hospital, I couldn't tell how many days I'd spent in a coma, but I knew it was a lot. Also, I lost the child. Nothing was more heartbreaking than that news. I saw my world crumble. I wondered who paid for my treatment, as I had no one. I was told later on that the head doctor had done so. I requested to see him, and he came. Contrary to what I had expected, he was a young man, and very handsome. He promised to take care of me throughout my stay at the hospital. 1 week after I woke up, I told the head doctor about what Carl had done to me, and he was livid. He swore to get Carl arrested if he found him. A few days later, Carl showed up at the hospital. I quickly alerted the head doctor, who beat him up before calling the police on him. It was shocking that he was bold enough to come to the hospital and ask for forgiveness. Anyway, he was jailed for 5 years. Life began to go smoothly for me. While Carl was in jail, I got a divorce and started my life afresh. The doctor and I were starting to get close, and soon, about 6 months later, we confessed having feelings for each other. The doctor, Peter, was the exact opposite of Carl. He took care of me more than I did for myself. He showed me love in every sweet way, and I couldn't be happier. He also helped me return to college before getting me a part-time job, which paid very handsomely. Life was getting better. After a year and a few months of dating, we got married. It was a grand wedding, and Peter refused to allow me to add even the littlest amount into the funding of the wedding. We had fights, but he always made sure to never cross any boundaries and never raised his hand to me. At 26, I had my son with Peter. He didn't stomp on my stomach to kill the child like Carl did, and loved him before he was even born. Our son was everything to us, and our growing family was happy. Well, until Carl was released. My son was aged 2 when Carl got released. I hadn't bothered about it, thinking he would be too ashamed to show his face to me. Well, he didn't show his face to me, but he did, to my son. My son suddenly went missing, 6 days after Carl returned. We reported to the cops, searched everywhere, called everyone, all to no avail. According to his school, a man had come to pick him up claiming to be my brother. They'd even spoken to me through his phone. Apparently, Carl had made a fake call and someone made it sound like I was the one speaking. With my permission, they released my son to him. I nearly went crazy. Suddenly, I got a call from Carl.
Hey, baby, it's been a while, hasn't it?
Carl, you bastard! Where's my son? He laughed and told me to meet him up without the police if I wanted to see my son. He requested $500,000 as ransom, claiming he deserved it for all the years he spent in jail.
I know you're rich, alongside your husband. You have until 3 days to bring me the money. Otherwise, forget about your son.
My heart shattered. He also warned me to come alone. I knew reporting to the police about him requesting for ransom would be a bad idea. Personally, I wanted to deal with Carl myself. I didn't want him going to jail, as that barely did anything to make him feel bad about his nasty behavior. I told Peter about it and he was pissed. Together, we drafted out a plan to deal with Carl ourselves. On the third day, we left our house without the police knowing, to the address he'd sent. Actually, I went in a different car, as I didn't want him knowing Peter would be coming with me. As soon as he saw me, he burst into a mocking laughter, holding my son beside him. My blood boiled. I didn't want his filthy hands on my child.
Is that the money? Bring it to me.
The bag in my hand was filled with fake dollar notes. I slowly walked to him and gave him the back. He opened it, and his greedy eyes widened as he saw the cash, not knowing they were all fake. Can I have my son now? Without hesitation, he pushed my son to me, and I pulled him into a hug, comforting him as I saw the fear in his eyes.
Well, I hope we never cross paths again. Bye, Chloe.
I ignored him as he hurriedly walked out of the room. He must have thought he'd gone free, but Peter and I had our plans. Peter was hiding and waiting outside for him. Once he got out, Peter calculated his move before pouncing on him. I ran out with my son to see him sitting on Carl, throwing punches to his face. Peter was a skilled Taekwondo black belt fighter, and Carl was a weakling. I knew he'd be finished in a few minutes. I covered my son's eyes, while Peter continued hitting Carl. He beat Carl up so much that the man was nearly unrecognizable. There was blood all over his body, and his ankles had been twisted by Peter. His right hand was obviously broken. His right eye was bleeding. As we walked away, I doubted his survival if no one found him. We left the area without raising any alarm. We knew he wouldn't dare involve the police, and would be scared to tamper with us in his miserable life again. We left him there, grumbling in pain. But did we care? Of course not. He'd tampered with our child and deserved to be punished. Would you do more if you were us?